Well, I'm sorry, that took me a minute to figure out how to actually go live. Good day, everyone, and Merry Christmas. We are live from the west coast of Canada on December 25th, 2024. How are you doing? How's your day so far? Mine's been pretty lazy. I just slept in. Didn't do much of anything except tidy up a little for the camera. So, how's everyone doing? Who have we got joining us? We have Kathy here. So, Kathy, thanks for coming by. Where are you from? And what's your weather like? The weather here is, rainy. And I had a look at the weather report, and it was rain today, showers tonight, periods of rain tomorrow, chance of showers tomorrow night. It's just like all these little umbrellas across the page with rain on them. So very cheerful for the end of the year. Is it windy there? We haven't got any wind up here where I am. Not yet, anyway. Could change later in the day, I imagine. So I called this stream Packing Light. And that has a lot of different connotations. It could be, learning how to take as little as possible on a trip and carry on only. But it also refers to life itself. And one of the things that I've been working on slowly is decluttering and getting to a more minimal kind of point of view. When I moved here, I was actually a little bit shocked at how much stuff I had. It just seemed like the movers were taking more and more stuff out of this little tiny basement apartment that I had. And this place is even smaller. And I've got boxes nicely hidden behind those bamboo screens back there. Very nice boxes. They're plastic totes, very nice looking. And there's probably at least 20 of them filled with things that I either can't unpack because I have no space, or obviously don't really need because I haven't used them since I got here. And probably some of them were in boxes at the old place because I didn't have room for them there. I'm not sure exactly why it's been difficult for me to go through those things. It's something that has been plaguing me. It's been on my mind, but I've never really gotten started with it. So one of the changes I've made this month for anyone who's followed the channel is trying to take a step into the light, live a little bit more. So a couple of days ago, I decided just start. So I went behind the screen, I pulled a box out, got the top off, reached in, and I pulled this out. The very first thing my hand touched. And when I looked at it, I realized this is a map and Amtrak information and other, keepsakes from my very first trip to California with my mom in 2007. Serendipity? I was floored. The very first thing that I touched. So on that trip, we went to Hollywood. We took the train down the coast. We went to Hollywood. Then we went to LA Airport Hotel, where there was a music conference I was attending. And then we went to San Francisco and Santa Barbara. It was a wonderful trip, and we enjoyed ourselves so much. I remember being in San Francisco, and we had this little travel visitor's guide with all the things you could do, and it was our ambition to finish, go to every one of those places, and we pretty much did. So I just thought it was really interesting that my first act of decluttering matched with this idea of taking a train trip across the US, as that was something my mother and I had talked about doing more than once. So I think one of the things I know about myself is I have to push myself to do these things. And I need to remember that when you're finished something, like when I finished going through that box and sorting it out and realizing that 99% of it was paper that I didn't need anymore. And when I finished, I kind of went, celebrate, lift my hand in the air. Yes, I did it. And then I started to cry. And I wasn't sure why at first. I mean, was I crying because I finally broke through that barrier and started to do something that I've been thinking about and wanting to do for a while? Or was it more to do with the fact that maybe keeping all these things around me is a form of illogical, irrational, but a form of protection or being in a cocoon? Because as much as I delight in the memory of that trip with my mom, there's there's sadness and grief around that too, because she's not here anymore. So perhaps making these changes are going to bring up emotions, but I think that I can't be scared of that anymore. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I'm very much looking forward to the trip. One of the things that I've done with the trip is kind of look at all the different things I'm doing, because I'm not just taking the train. I'll be stopping in different cities along the way. And I'm not really a big tourist person. I don't necessarily want to go to all the places that every other tourist would want to go to. So I really had to think about that and think about, how do I want to design a trip that will feed my soul. And so I've been doing Google searches and watching a lot of videos about things, different train trips and the different cities that I'll be visiting. I've been looking at them on the map. And so just sort of through watching videos and coming up with things, one of the things that's great about Google Maps is that when you search a place, they have little places along the top you can click if you want to look for restaurants or museums and things like that. So I wasn't very satisfied with anything that I was looking at for Seattle, other than going to Pike Street Market, which I thought would be fun, especially early in the morning. But I was on the map and I was looking around, and I'd been reading a bunch of things, and nobody had mentioned this, but there is a Nordic museum in Ballard, which is, I think, a suburb of Seattle. So when I saw that, I looked it up, found out when they're open, how much it is to go there. And then I looked at where it was in comparison to where I was staying. It's about a 15-20 minute drive by taxi, I guess, or you can probably take a bus there. And then when I was looking on the map, I realized it was very close to a botanical garden and the Ballard Locks. So that was it. I was just like, there's a day trip for me that I would really enjoy. If it's really rainy, I can spend more time in the museum. At the botanical garden, there's a visitor center. And then hopefully, if the weather is clear enough, I can hang out by the docks and maybe watch a ship go through. That would be very, very cool. So that's the kind of thing that I would prefer to do, other than go to the Space Needle and various things like that. So that was one day planned, possibly, and fairly flexible. I'm there for 2 or 3 days, and depending on the weather, I can choose to do different things. Then I was watching another video about, things to do in Seattle, and they talked about taking the ferry to Bainbridge Island. And they showed some video of, the ferry trip and then this little tiny village. So I just started to do some research into that. There's a museum in the village, and there's a nice bookstore and a couple places to eat. And it's only $7 return on the ferry. And I thought, there's another day. I would love that. I could get on the water. I can take some pictures. I can explore a little charming little village, hang out in the bookstore, find a book to read on the train, and check out the museum. So that's the kind of thing that just really fits me, So that's the kind of trip planning I like to do. I call that, I guess they call it nowadays. I don't know if they would call it, maybe they would call it slow travel, because I'm certainly traveling by train. And I can remember the first time I took the train from Seattle to LA to go to a music conference. I mentioned to more than one person that I would be taking the train, and they all looked at me with quizzically and asked, how long is that going to take? And I said 2 days, and they were just like rolling their eyes. But to me, that's the journey. Yes, I can get on a plane and be there in 2.5 hours, plus all the waiting time at the airport and security and having to be up in the air and everything. But to sit on a train with a cup of tea and watch the scenery go by, uh, to me, that's part of the vacation, So for this trip, it's a lot of slow travel in a way. And years ago, as an armchair traveler, yeah, I would go into bookstores and leaf through travel books. And I remember reading this one book that I eventually bought about Paris. And one of the things they said in there was that you could rent, and back then, you could rent a room at a monastery for a whole month for, I think it was $500. Probably double that or triple that now, but that just really intrigued me. I thought, I'd love to do that. I would love to go somewhere and stay there for 3 weeks or 4 weeks and just immerse myself in the culture. Go out and buy groceries and make something at my little flat, or go to a cafe and watch people go by, learn to speak a little bit more of the language, try to see things through the eyes of someone who lives there. So that just really created a wish in me to do something like that. So this very first trip is in the United States, but I'm hoping, if finances and other things work out, that perhaps by the end of the year, you might find me somewhere in the UK for a month, and then maybe somewhere else for a month. So that's the dream, you know. And part of that dream is really taking a look at my finances, which I have just done a video on. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I'm excited about the trip, and I'm also a little bit nervous about it. It's been a long time since I've been anywhere. I think my last trip uh, down to the States was in 2017. So, and I did have plans to travel a couple of years after that, but then COVID hit and travel just seemed pretty much off the plan, off the list of choices for a while. Um, so yes, I was talking about the dream, In order to achieve the dream, look at finances. look at the things that you're spending money on. I was watching another live stream with someone I'm subscribed to the other day, and they were talking about finances. And a lot of people in the chat were saying that, they probably spend too much money on things they don't need, like DoorDash. And many of us are too deeply in debt. So I think it's a pretty common concern. I'm really glad I took the time to sit down and go through exactly how much I was spending every month. And it was amazing to me that although I consider myself, I live by a budget and I consider myself to be somewhat frugal, I was amazed to see how much these sort of hidden costs, like when you subscribe to a channel on streaming, that it just kind of disappears from your mind. And then you find another channel that has another show you like, and you subscribe to that one. And before you know it, you're subscribed to 10 different channels and it's costing you $105 a month. So, yeah, I had to take a good hard look at that and all the other subscriptions that pile up because I'm a composer and I have subscriptions to various different things to do with the what they call virtual instruments, VSTs, and other things. I really liked when I bought Serum, which is another instrument. They had a pay to own, which I liked, so that rather than just paying a subscription every month, you paid it for a couple of years and then you owned it. And I much prefer that way of doing it, but just having to pay this amount of money every month. And although that gives you the right to use whatever you're using, again, those things can add up after a while. So I did do a lot of looking at what I have and what I'm using and where I'm at. And I think in that video, I discovered that I had saved about $455 a month. That's pretty significant when you think after 10 months, that would be $4,000. Price of the cost or the price of a trip to Europe, don't you think? So, and I guess this goes along with this big trend towards simplifying and minimalizing. One of the things that I see a lot of people talking about is loneliness, and apparently there's a loneliness epidemic. And I wonder, even though we're all so much better connected than we ever were before, and we can talk to each other instantly, we can text each other, we can get on FaceTime or Zoom or talk live on YouTube. Why is it that we feel less connected? And I think a lot of it has to do with sort of an absence of face-to-face kind of connection, you know? It's kind of like you can watch videos on nature, you can watch documentaries on birds or places to go. You can look out your window, but until you actually walk out into nature and you're actually there, physically there, breathing the air, hearing the birds, you don't feel it the same way. And maybe it's the same thing with our communications these days. Texting is very nice. It's great that we can do it, but it really only shares about 10% of what we're trying to say. And it's great that we have the ability to talk to each other when we're in different places. But there's something about sitting down with someone for a cup of tea, just face to face in reality, that perhaps has an added aspect. It's more natural, it's more real. One of the things I've become aware of in myself, and up until now, I haven't even owned a smartphone. But one thing I notice is if I'm doing something, that after a while my mind will want to go and check my email or look at something else. And I think that maybe one of our feelings of lack of connection is that we're so much looking for that frenetic activity, that busyness that keeps us what they call doom scrolling apparently, just just looking at things ad nauseum. It's kind of like I remember back when you could turn on the TV and you could go to the schedule and you'd be leafing through the schedule. It'd probably take you 15 minutes to look through the schedule. You'd see a few things you wanted to watch, but you couldn't remember what they were by the end, so you'd have to go back through it again. And it's kind of like that on YouTube. You go into your home and there's your feed and you're scrolling through your feed, and yeah, you pick a few things for watch later, and before you know it, you've got a watch later of 100 videos that you've never watched. So I think it's important that we disconnect. When I woke up this morning, I thought about it. I didn't turn on my desktop computer even once yesterday, and that's a rarity for me. I know that there are times when I get up from my bed and I walk over and I switch on the desktop. I haven't even had a drink of water or done my exercises or made a cup of tea. So I think that slowing down, taking more time to be mindful, getting out into nature, making sure we have some person to person contact that isn't interrupted by technology is probably pretty important for us to feel less lonely and more connected in a real kind of way. So I think it's wonderful, though, that we have this technology and that I can watch 100 videos on traveling by train or going to Europe or visiting a certain city and things like that. I love that. I love that all that information is at my fingertips. But one thing I don't do, and I mentioned this, I think, in my very first video, is I don't watch the news. I do get newsletters. I get the local newspaper sent to me via email, so I can take a look at the headlines and I can decide what stories I want to read. I don't watch the news because I'm not saying that it's manufactured, but the way it is presented is often it's manufactured in how it is meant to create a response in us, and that response is always negative. It's always negative energy. It's fear, it's concern, it's upset. And so we've bred this society now that is reliant on this technology, and where people react to things without actually thinking it through and checking the source and finding out what the actual facts are. Just because you read something on Facebook doesn't mean it's true. And even if that person believes in what was said, and do the amount of negative emotion, the darkness that is created through this is really profound. So I think another part of the loneliness epidemic is that sense that the world is a dark and stark place. And we're fed this dish by the media, and we are bred and raised and taught to be consumers. And one of the things that we consume is excess information. So slowing down and being thoughtful about when we access information and what we're specifically looking for. So one of my friends, my partner actually, we used to play a game together, and a lot of people would go into that game and just hang out and even fall asleep in the game and things like that. And he always said to me, I only go into the game when I've got something specific to do. And I think that's really wise. So when I do a Google search, it's because I have something specific I'm looking for. When I go into YouTube, I have something specific I am wanting to find information about, so that I'm not then inundated with all this other stuff that I'm not really interested in, but is presented in a calculated way to bait me, hook me into looking at that content. So that's my thoughts on that. This is my very first live stream, so I hope what I've said made sense. I hope that you're going to have a lovely day. Whether you celebrate Christmas or not, I hope it's a peaceful day with a nice cup of tea, coffee. I've got some shortbread cookies I'm going to be eating. And for my Christmas dinner, I'm having a turkey sandwich. Simple, easy, and enjoyable. So thank you very much for joining me, Kathy, and anyone else who comes along after this. Thank you so much for watching. I am nearly at 300 subscribers, and I only just began on December the 1st. So I wish to thank everyone who has subscribed and anyone who's watching. Thank you so much for your attention and for watching. Take care, everybody, and we'll be talking again soon. Now I just have to figure out how to end the stream. Bye for now.